Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and this is going to be a brief little review for Btooom, Episode 8. Really awesome episode once again. Lots of new stuff going on in this episode, and also lots of playing back on that whole thing with Himeko and Ryota. Now, right before we get the OP, of course, we're looking at this sort of flashback of Himeko's, where it's basically once she's been branded an outcast. Her friends have treated her like crap. They don't want her in school, and she's really depressed about this. She's really lonely, and she's basically, I think, seeking comfort in the virtual environment of the Btooom game. And of course, this is something that Ryota, as he explains in the episode, has made of his entire life. I mean, basically, he escapes into the online world as often as he can, and it's gotten to the point where that becomes much more important to him, which is very interesting because it's almost like they're a match made in heaven, if you will. But I really thought this was interesting too, because once the OP begins, I'm somebody, if you're familiar with my Sword Art Online reviews, I'm always paying attention to the OP in that series because it seems to be there are key elements of the unfolding story that are played on in it, that are always animated in it. And in this particular case, this is the first episode where at the very end of the OP, you actually see Himeko and Ryota's hands grasping each other. Up until now, they would always fade out just before those hands intertwined. And I think it's really awesome that they actually sort of put that in because it's very evocative of what's going on. That exploration between the both of them, Ryota's basically kind of decided for himself, I think, even though he still says he's not sure, he thinks he got it wrong, I think he still suspects this is the Himeko, the one he knows from the virtual game, whereas Himeko is still kind of searching her feelings. She does now trust him, but she's afraid to reveal that to him, and she's afraid to reveal, hey, this was really me. This is the me you knew in the game and everything like that. And that whole arc is just really interesting to me. Now, once that OP is done, though, we get right into some new characters being debuted. Most notably, we have this new girl, Kinoshita. She basically betrays this guy who's meant to protect her, and this is a recurring theme through this entire episode, the male and female dynamic and how it seems like one will betray the other, although whereas most of the focus on the episode would seem to imply it is the male partner of a male-female relationship on this island that will be the betrayer. In this particular case, we see that this girl betrays the guy she's with, sends him over a cliff into this little den of, wanting Komodo dragons, and she basically says, you're here to save me, ha ha ha, blows them up and everything. And so we see that people really are cutthroat now that they're on this island. They know this isn't a game, and some people are really taking it seriously. I mean, we have Miyamoto as a perfect example in the last couple episodes. And speaking of Miyamoto, if we go back to that pre-credits sequence with, Sakamoto basically questioning himself, he's really doubting himself. He's almost like comparing himself to Miyamoto, as in saying, this guy, he really had his head around what's going on, and I haven't. It took me to fight for this girl before I got to that point. And I wonder if he's having a crisis of self in that way, because he talks about later on in the episode with Himeko that there are times when he turns himself off, and he just becomes more calm, becomes more calculated, and this is the gamer side of him that, even though it was more fast-paced than he's allowing himself to explain, I think this is the side of himself that really just went ape when that kid Kira and he were fighting and stuff like that. When Himeko was kidnapped, this is the side of him that came out. And so I wonder if he thinks he can't tap into that by himself, if he needs a prompting, basically. And in that way, he's doubting himself. But I think he's, pretty much coming to the conclusion that I can be that way if I need to. And however that's going to play out with the rest of the story, I don't know. Of course, we also go back to Tyrannos Japan. We see that fat hat-wearing dude who wishes himself to be a Kevin Smith, I assume, and he's basically talking to the Tyrannos Japan CEO, one Lex Luthor, or at least that's what the guy looks like, and he's, approving of all of this stuff, all of the stuff that's going on this island. This hat-wearing dude has made 3D models of all the characters. It's all going to be streaming live. People are going to get to pay to see it, like pay-per-view probably. And the CEO is just eating this up. He's like, this is your best idea ever. This is so awesome. It apparently is, as I speculated in my last review, going to be the next big sort of reality show, game show type of thing, only it's life and death, and they want to sell this to the world. Well, we've seen stuff like this in entertainment formats before, and I can only think that these people are going to be taken down in the end. I can only imagine whoever survives the island are probably going to hunt these guys down and make them pay for it. Maybe, I don't know, but it's just really malevolent what they're doing. Now, touching back on the whole relationship between Himeko and Ryota as it unfolds in this episode, we see that, they basically decide to take a breather. It's nighttime. They don't want to travel through the island because it's so dangerous, and they're going to sleep in this building where all of this crazy stuff that happened in the last couple episodes unfolded. And you have Ryota just going through the pack, giving her some new clothes, and even though she's really tense around him, I think she's still beginning to implicitly trust him. It's not just because it's the only choice she has. She's making the best out of the situation, which could be said for some of the players we've seen. They're just sort of dealing with each other as long as they have to. And again, touching back on that overarching theme of this episode, betrayal. But I believe she senses this is the Sakamoto I knew in the game. This is definitely him. He is a heroic guy. He's chivalrous. He's going to be there for me. And there's this point where he's going to be showing how chivalrous he is. He's going to go sleep in another room. He's going to let her be by herself because he figures she's still very scarred by what's happened to her, and he hasn't detected the change in her manner, But she basically, under the cover of pleading, like, what do you think you're doing? You're not leaving me alone, that she's scared. I mean, yes, she probably is, but I really think it's that trust in him that she now has built up within her that, he's not going to betray her. He's not going to try to hurt her. Now, in the middle of the night, she's having this nightmare, and she ends up waking up from it and seeing this woman with a flashlight pointed right at her face. They don't know it's a woman at first. It seems like it's a ghost, the white ghost, as the title suggests. And of course, Sakamoto goes and chases this woman down. Well, he ends up backed into a corner, almost booby-trapped, because he finds her little room and everything, and she jumps at him. She's got this little hand scythe and tries to take his head off and stuff like that. And once, he gets Himeko there to talk to her, she just goes schizo. Get that man away. Keep all men away. That kind of thing. And it's almost like looking into the future of what Himeko could have become if she was really on this island alone. If all she had ever known was those three guys she met when she was first on the island in the second episode, which was the Himeko-centric episode, as I refer to it. If that's all she'd known, this is the woman she probably would have become, and that's kind of scary. But this woman comes to confide in Himeko. She basically outlines her entire previous life, that she was a nurse until she was brought to this island, and it really touches base with that whole aspect that, we've heard little bits and pieces of speculation from the characters in the show that this has gone on before, that people were on this island before, and this woman is one of those people. She's still around on this island from whatever previous group of people were brought prior to Ryota, Himeko, Taira, and all of them. And that's really freaky because what exactly has been going on? How long has this been going on? How many groups of people have been brought to this island? It's really just a handful of terrifying questions that come up when you really think about it. But of course, she's relating how the doctor she worked for, this boss she greatly respected, and I'm thinking probably romantically looked at as well, he basically got involved in a medical malady of sorts, and he was going to be fired. So to protect him, she decided to falsify documents, and this ends up backfiring because, of course, this guy sells her out. He basically betrays her. Now, with a history like this, even though they both end up on this island together because of whatever this malady was, they start to work together, and she doesn't seem to perceive that he's going to betray her again. But of course, it's inevitable. He does. He's only thinking of himself, and this is why she's very sort of scathingly warning to Himeko, don't trust this guy you're with. If you get enough chips, if, there's only so much food, whatever it is, things could turn at any moment. She's basically warning Himeko. And I really do think that, while Himeko's taking this at her word, she really is respecting what this woman is saying, she still made it up in her mind that she trusts Ryota. And she says as much. We hear some of her thoughts in an internal monologue, and she says, I do trust Ryota. I know he will save me. I know he will continue to save me, and I know we'll get off this island together, but why haven't I told him I am the Himeko he knew? Why haven't I told him about that betrayal where this woman and this guy, once they got enough chips, he betrayed her, and then I'm afraid of that happening. And as I say, this dynamic is just really enjoyable to watch for me because if you think back to earlier in the night, once Ryota had explained why he went and saved her, he thought she was the Himeko he knew from the game and stuff like that. She just sobs so gratefully that he came and saved her. In her eyes, he basically became a hero. And so it's really interesting, this dynamic. And once day breaks, they basically decide they have to go backtrack through the jungles and find Tyra again because they left him high and dry. He was bleeding to death the last they saw of him, and that would freak me out personally. I'd want to be back there as soon as possible. So, of course, this woman sends them on their way with best wishes and that kind of thing. And here's the real shocker. Well, this doctor guy who, every time I've seen images of him, this is the first time we're actually seeing him in the show, but every image I've ever seen of this guy reminds me of the Angry Video Game Nerd, because he's got the white shirt, he's got the glasses, the hair kind of matches, the overall look looks like the AVGN. So I'm just sitting there thinking, it's funny in that aspect, but it's also terrifying because some reason he was brought back to this island, and that to me is just insane. The people are made to fight and kill each other and do all this stuff, and they're supposed to get so many chips and then they can get off the island. Well, how are they brought back then? Does this mean it's perpetual, that these people will never get free of this island? That, the hope of actually getting back to their original lives, could that be just the carrot on the end of the stick being held in front of their faces to keep them doing this stuff, to keep them running through the motions, and maybe they'll never actually get anywhere? That is such a freaky, horrifying way of looking at this. So, once again, Btooom is awesome. I really enjoyed this episode. I loved all the insights into the psychologies of the characters and the just unfolding dynamics in the relationships between them, the trust factor, the distrust factor, and all the new stuff that's going to be coming into play, because, of course, some of the biggest baddies have already been taken out in the previous episode, and now we need a whole bunch of new ones. And there's still some people I know from the OP that we haven't seen yet, and I'm just really excited to see how this all plays out. I can only hope Tyrannos Japan gets their just desserts for what they've done to people. And otherwise, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you think of Btooom. Are you enjoying the series? Was this episode awesome for you? If you've read the manga, which I haven't, without spoilers, is this still following it pretty closely? Because I'm always curious with every show that I watch that I know is based on either a light novel or a manga, is it going to stick to the source material respectfully enough? And so, yeah, I'd love to hear that from you guys. And otherwise, it's going to be it from me on this one. So I'll catch you later. Peace.